My husband looked me in the eye and said he was moving his girlfriend into our house. The house I had spent 2 years paying for. The house where his parents had been living rent-free on my savings. He actually smiled when he said it, and then my mother-in-law laughed. That was the moment I realized I had been living inside someone else's plan the whole time. But here is the thing by then. I had already written my own ending. My name is Claire, and I am 34 years old. I work as a senior financial analyst at a consulting firm in Calgary, Alberta. I have been with the same company for 9 years, and I worked my way up from an entry-level position right out of university. Numbers make sense to me. I understand compound interest, amortization schedules, risk assessment. I can look at a balance sheet and tell you within minutes where the money is bleeding out. The irony of what happened to me is something I will carry for a very long time. I met my husband, Daniel, when I was 28. He was 31. A mutual friend introduced us at a small dinner party, and I remember thinking he was one of the most charming people I had ever met. He was warm, attentive, and funny in a way that felt effortless. He worked in sales at a mid-size logistics company, made a decent income, and seemed genuinely proud of me when I talked about my career. That was something I was not used to. Previous partners had been intimidated by my salary or my independence. Daniel seemed to celebrate it. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. I said yes without hesitation. His parents, his father Gerald and his mother Patrice, lived about 40 minutes outside the city, in a house they had owned for over 20 years. I met them early in our relationship, and they were lovely to me, or at least they appeared to be. Patrice baked when I came to visit. Gerald told stories about raising Daniel that made me laugh. I genuinely liked them. I thought of them as the warm family I had always wanted. My own parents had divorced when I was 12, and holidays had been strained and complicated my whole life. Daniel's family felt like something solid, something I could count on. We got married in the fall. It was a small ceremony around 60 people, mostly close friends and family. We bought a house together the following spring, a semi-detached in a quiet neighborhood in the northwest of the city. I contributed 70% of the down payment because Daniel had some existing debt from a car loan and a line of credit. I did not mind at the time. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. You covered the gap when your partner needed you to. The first year of marriage was good. We settled into our routines. I worked long hours but came home to a clean house and a husband who cooked dinner most nights. His parents visited on weekends. Life felt stable and comfortable in a way I had not experienced before. Then, about 14 months into the marriage, Daniel sat me down one evening with an expression I had never seen on his face before. He looked uncomfortable. He was fidgeting with his watch, which he only ever did when he was nervous. He told me his parents were in serious financial trouble. He explained it carefully, like he had rehearsed it. His father had made some bad investments years ago. There had been some credit card debt that spiraled, a loan from a private lender that had accumulated interest faster than they could manage. The total amount owing, Daniel said quietly, was somewhere around $140,000. I sat with that number for a moment. That is a life-changing amount of debt for a retired couple. I understood that immediately. Gerald was 67 and had been out of the workforce for 3 years. Patrice worked part-time at a garden center, but earned very little. They had no real way to climb out of that hole on their own. I asked Daniel why he had never mentioned any of this before. He said he had not known the full picture himself, that his parents had been too ashamed to tell him everything. He said they had only just come to him because they were afraid a collections agency was about to take action. I asked what he wanted me to do. He said he was not asking me to do anything. He just wanted me to know. But then he said, and this is exactly how he said it, that if there was any way I could help, even a little, it would mean everything to him. He said his parents were the most important people in his life. He said he would spend the rest of his marriage making it up to me. I thought about it for 3 days. I ran the numbers. I looked at my savings, my investments, my emergency fund. I was in a strong financial position because I had been disciplined for years. I had close to $220,000 in liquid savings at that point. I could cover the debt and still have a comfortable cushion. I also thought about who these people were to me, or who I believed them to be. I thought about Patrice crying at our wedding. I thought about Gerald shaking my hand and telling me he had never seen Daniel so happy. I thought about what it would feel like to watch two elderly people lose their home over a debt that I could genuinely help eliminate. I decided to help, but I am a financial analyst. I was not going to hand over $140,000 on a handshake. I told Daniel that I was willing to help his parents clear the debt, but that I wanted to do it properly. I wanted a written agreement, a simple document outlining the amount, the purpose, and a repayment schedule, even if it was very modest. I also told him I wanted to transfer the money directly to the creditors, not to his parents, and I wanted documentation confirming the debts were real. Daniel looked briefly surprised, but then he nodded. He said that was completely fair. He said his parents would have no problem with any of that. 2 weeks later, I had copies of the debt statements. I had a signed agreement between myself and Gerald and Patrice acknowledging the loan. And I had transferred the funds directly to the lender and the collections account. Everything was documented. Everything was clean. Gerald and Patrice came to our home that same evening. Patrice hugged me for a long time. Gerald shook my hand with both of his, and his eyes were wet. They told me I had saved their lives. They told me Daniel had chosen so well. I felt the kind of warmth that comes from doing something genuinely good for people you care about. I did not know then what I know now. I did not know that the warmth I was feeling was completely one-sided. Life continued. Daniel and I talked occasionally about the repayment, which was supposed to begin 6 months after I cleared the debt. Small monthly amounts, nothing dramatic, just a gesture of good faith. But 6 months passed, and then 7, and then 10, and not a single payment came. When I brought it up with Daniel, he deflected. He said his parents were still getting back on their feet. He said it would be embarrassing to push them right now. He said, I knew when we got into this that it might take time. I let it go the first time. I let it go the second time. By the third time, I noticed that Daniel also could not seem to account for where his own paycheck was going each month. He consistently said he had nothing to spare, but he had upgraded his truck, he had taken a golf trip with friends, and he had bought himself a very expensive watch for his birthday. I started paying closer attention. I began to notice smaller things I had dismissed before. The way Daniel changed the subject when I asked about his finances. The way his parents never stayed for long when it was just the three of us, but always arrived in a group with Daniel when I had recently paid a large bill or made a significant purchase. The way Patrice sometimes made comments that felt just slightly off, things like, "You must be doing so well at work," Claire delivered in a tone that felt more like inventory than admiration. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that financial stress does strange things to families, and that I needed to extend some grace. Then came a Tuesday, in November. I had left my laptop at home that morning and driven back from the office to pick it up. It was about 11, maybe 11:15. Daniel was supposed to be at work. His parents were not expected over. When I pulled into the driveway, his father's car was there. I let myself in quietly because I had come in through the side door and I was already thinking about grabbing my laptop and getting back to the office quickly. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. I stopped in the hallway because something about the tone made me pause. It was not raised voices, it was laughter. Relaxed, comfortable laughter. And then I heard my name. Gerald was speaking. He said something like, "This woman genuinely has no idea. Daniel, your timing with this was perfect. Wait until the debt is cleared, and then you tell her." Patrice said, "Just make sure she doesn't find out before then." And then Daniel laughed and said, "Relax, she trusts me completely. She's got too much faith in people. Always has." I stood in that hallway for what felt like a very long time. I do not know how to fully describe what it feels like to hear your own husband mock your trust in him to his parents. In your own home, in the middle of a Tuesday morning, there is a particular kind of cold that settles in your chest. It is not hot anger, not at first. It is just a very quiet, very still recognition that something you believed in entirely was never real. I did not go into the kitchen. I backed out through the side door as carefully as I had come in. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes, and then I drove back to the office. That evening, I acted completely normally. I made dinner. I asked Daniel about his day. I laughed at something he said. I was so calm I almost frightened myself. Over the next several weeks, I began to put things in order. The first thing I did was speak to a lawyer, a family lawyer, my colleague had used the previous year for her own separation. I wanted to understand exactly where I stood. I brought every document I had: the debt repayment agreement, the transfer records, the signed acknowledgement from Gerald and Patrice. My lawyer reviewed everything and told me that the signed agreement was enforceable. If it came to it, I had a legitimate claim to repayment from his parents. She also told me that in terms of the matrimonial home, because I had contributed significantly more to the down payment and had documentation of that, there were strong arguments in my favor in any division proceeding. I also quietly began separating my finances. I moved the majority of my savings into an account in my name only. I adjusted my direct deposit. I did not make any dramatic moves, nothing that would tip Daniel off, but I made sure that if a line was crossed, I would not be caught flat-footed. And then I waited. Daniel told me, on a Sunday afternoon in late January, that he wanted to talk. He had the same look on his face as he had the night he told me about his parents' debt. Rehearsed, uncomfortable but committed to it. He said he had met someone. He said it had been going on for about 8 months. He said he was sorry, but he was not in love with me anymore, and he wanted to move forward with this other person. He said he thought it would be best if I moved out so he could transition smoothly. He actually used the word smoothly. I asked him where he expected me to go. He said I could stay with my mother for a while. He said he and his girlfriend were planning to move in together and that his parents would likely come stay with them for a bit while they got settled. So, not only was he asking me to leave my own home, he was planning to install his girlfriend and his parents in it. I looked at him for a moment and then I said, very calmly, "I need you to understand something. This is not your house." He frowned. He said my name in that tone people use when they think you are being irrational. I said it again. "This is not your house. The down payment was funded almost entirely from my savings. The mortgage is in my name because your credit score was not sufficient to be a primary applicant, and when we refinanced 8 months ago, the title was restructured. My lawyer ensured the registration reflects my primary ownership. So you are welcome to leave. But you are leaving alone." The look on his face shifted. And then he said something that I think was meant to hurt me. He said, "Fine, but you still paid off my parents' debt. That money is gone. So congratulations on buying yourself nothing," I said. "The agreement your parents signed is a legally binding acknowledgement of debt to me. If they do not begin repayment within 30 days, my lawyer will initiate proceedings." He went very quiet. His parents arrived about an hour later. I think he had called them. Patrice walked in, looking the way she always did when she needed something from me: warm, soft, performatively concerned. Gerald stood slightly behind her with his arms crossed. Daniel had apparently told them everything, because Patrice opened with, "Claire, sweetheart, we can all be adults about this. Daniel has moved on, and you are a strong, successful woman. You will be completely fine." I said, "I know I will be. And you two will be hearing from my lawyer regarding the repayment schedule on the $140,000. I gave you 30 days notice this evening. I wanted to tell you in person." The warmth left Patrice's face so fast it was almost impressive. Gerald started talking about how the agreement was informal, how it was a family matter, how no judge would take it seriously. I let him finish. And then I said, "The agreement is signed, witnessed, and notarized. The debt transfers are documented. My lawyer has reviewed the full file. I would be happy to let the courts decide how informal it is." Nobody said anything for a while. Daniel tried one more time. He said that if I was going to be this way about it, fine, but I should know that he had given up a lot to be with me too, that he had compromised, that he had stayed in a marriage that had not made him happy for a long time. I thought about the 11 months I had spent not saying a word while I quietly protected myself. I thought about the Tuesday morning in the hallway. I thought about every dinner I had cooked, every mortgage payment I had made, every moment I had chosen to believe the best about people who were calibrating my kindness like a resource to be extracted. I said, I really hope you and your girlfriend are happy. I mean that. And I genuinely hope your parents find a way to repay what they owe me, because the alternative is going to be significantly more expensive for them. Now, I have an early morning. You all know where the door is. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. The asset division came out strongly in my favor, given the documented ownership records and the disparity in financial contributions. Gerald and Patrice negotiated a repayment agreement through their own lawyer, modest monthly payments over several years, but binding and enforceable. My lawyer is watching that closely. Daniel and his girlfriend moved into a rental. From what I understand through mutual friends, it has not been as smooth as he planned. I stayed in the house. I repainted the living room, a color I had wanted for 3 years, but had never chosen, because Daniel said it was too dark. It is a deep, warm green. I love it. I want to say something to anyone who is reading this or listening to this story, because I think it matters. If someone asks you to extend financial generosity to their family, and maybe it comes from a place of real love, and maybe you have the means to help, please protect yourself legally before you do anything. A signed agreement is not a sign of distrust. It is a sign of maturity. It is the thing that allows generosity to exist without leaving you exposed. The people who genuinely love you will respect that. The people who push back against documentation are telling you something important about their intentions. And if you ever find yourself standing in a hallway hearing your own name spoken like a punchline, do not react in the moment. Write everything down. Call a lawyer. Separate what is yours. And then wait, quietly and carefully, until you are ready. Anger is loud, but strategy is effective. I was never the person in this story who needed saving. I just took a little while to remember that.